For those who came to the Atlantic Council Energy Forum in 2017, you would have seen the seeds of transformation taking place in the UAE and in Abu Dhabi specifically. And one of those transformations was a big focus to consolidate some of the entities here in Abu Dhabi in particular. We saw a merger with the banks, which is quite extraordinary, a top-line view of what the different sovereign funds were doing in the country, collaboration with ADIA, one with ADEC, one with Mubadala, and then the consolidation of Mubadala as a development fund with IPEC, which had a very keen investment strategy as a player, particularly in oil and gas and other assets. In this 12-month period, we saw Mubadala come together with IPEC and create an entity of $125 billion with an investment strategy. We're very pleased to have the CEO who runs the Petroleum and Petrochemicals division of the group to lay out his strategy for Mubadala Petroleum. Let's give a warm welcome to Masab Al-Kalbi, the CEO of Mubadala Petroleum and Petrochemicals. Welcome to the battling wrestling ring. You thought it was going to be a nice time. Ask the minister if you enjoyed it. He'll tell you honestly afterwards. So just
thank you.
It's good to have you. First, we have to congratulate you on your elevation to CEO of Mubadala Petroleum and Petrochemicals. Strategically, and I think it's very key for our visitors from outside, we're looking at an investment fund at Mubadala, $125 billion overall. You're almost about a third about it, but just above $40 billion. Lay out, because Mubadala, I've known it for 10 years, was primarily a development fund. It's changed its mandate to an investment fund. Yeah. First and foremost, how does that play out when it comes to petroleum and petrochemicals?
Back in 2016, late in 2016, the government of Abu Dhabi announced the merger between the two very successful entities, Mubadala Development Company and International Petroleum Investment Company. So back in May 2017, we became fully operational, very successful merger. Part of the reason it's successful because the government took strategic decision from day number one. No one is going to talk about the valuation. We belong to the same owner. So the merger went very successful. We are almost 6 months in operation. Our mandate is very simple: create value. So value creation, diversification, and achieving a very attractive financial return for the shareholder, which is the government of Abu Dhabi. Now, in the petroleum and petrochemicals, it's the first time that we have a full integrated oil and gas portfolio. We're active in the upstream side, almost 500,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day in production. We're also active in the midstream with big strategic projects in the region and elsewhere. But in the refining, north of 1 million barrels of oil of refining capacity, primarily in Europe and in Asia. In the petchem, it's a very interesting story. We have a very solid position in the polyolefin. If you integrate our business with the JV that we have with ADNOC here, Abu Dhabi is the 4th largest polyolefin producer globally. So a very substantial, very integrated, very successful merger happened in 2017, and we're looking forward for the next phase of our journey.
You brought a lot up in the first answer, and I want to kind of drill down into individual segments of it. First and foremost, you take a development fund and what was a sovereign investment fund and blend them together. It's not a simple match. Share with this audience the discipline of trying to bring two very different entities, different mindsets together. It's my understanding that His Excellency Al Mubarak, who's the executive CEO and chairman of Mubadala Investment Company, actually visits IPIC, and it's nearby the Mubadala headquarters. But it was the relationships of trying to bring the two together. And oftentimes, as you know, with M&A activity, they fail on relationships.
I think As I mentioned earlier, it was extremely successful integration between the two entities, and part of the reason, again, is evaluation. So there was no discussion. The government decided from day number one that is an equal merge, or a merge of equals, and we integrated. So that part was put aside. Then, of course, in any merger, the biggest challenge is integrating the cultures when it comes to the people side.
Yes.
And the human capital. So we approached it in a very delicate way. And I think what you see today, after 6 months of the merger, and the recent track record of what we announced, prove that, yes, of course, we took it very carefully, and it's been overall very successful merger.
I want to talk to you about the global investment climate and where you see opportunity, but I think domestically it would be interesting to see the relationship, because His Excellency Minister Mazrui was in Mubadala before, so you know each other, and Sultan Al Jaber came from the Mubadala family as well. So where does that work on a day-to-day practical activity where you can collaborate or not?
Yeah, I think Dr. Sultan articulated the strategy of ADNOC yesterday. They're planning to expand in the refining and triple their petrochemical business. But let me take you back to the 90s. The foundation of the petrochemical industry in Abu Dhabi is a partnership between one of Mubadala's companies now, Borealis, and ADNOC. So we've been extremely happy with the partnership. It's been also rewarding to both sides, especially ADNOC, and also the Borealis, which is Mubadala's company now. Going forward, however, the strategy is to create more value from in the value chain. So we've seen big companies globally tracing the barrel, not necessarily in the upstream, but you go all the way down to the refining and petchem. So we're very committed. Well, I think the relationship with ADNOC has been historically very successful, and we're looking forward to strengthen that relationship going forward. By the way, during ADIPEC, which is 2 months back, Mubadala, one of Mubadala's companies, SABSA, and ADNOC announced an MOU to build an LAB, linear alkyl benzene, which sounds very technical, by the way. It's the raw material that we use for biodegradable detergents. So the idea is to build a big complex here in Ruwais. It is going to be a partnership between one of Mubadala's companies, SABSA, and ADNOC. We're looking forward to explore additional opportunities going forward.
Yeah, see, we often, those who cover the oil market, like the broad strokes of, this is production, these are the geopolitics that fit into the debate within OPEC and non-OPEC. But the art of your job right now, and the art of Dr. Sultan Al Jaber's job, is to go as downstream as much as possible in the value chain, right? Give us a sense of the investments you're doing, whether it's with Borealis or CEPSA, the other Mubadala Petroleum companies that'll accelerate that in the next 5 years.
I think the year 2017 has been a very exciting year for us. First of all, the merger happened in Abu Dhabi here, but also we took big decisions in the investment side. So I'll give you a flavor of what we're about to finalize, a final investment decision on a big gas discovery in Malaysia. That's a result of a very successful exploration program run by Mubadala Petroleum, one of Mubadala's companies in Southeast Asia. It is a multi-TCF of gas that will feed their LNG facilities. So we're about to take the final investment decision. We're very proud of the performance done by Mubadala Petroleum, and it is Mubadala Petroleum is the operator of that big discovery. So that's one in the upside. In the refining, we're in discussion to expand our footprint in Pakistan. We already have one very successful joint venture with the Pakistanis and the Austrians, 1,000 barrel of oil per day refinery, and we're thinking of taking that to another phase of expansion. In the petchem, it's very interesting, and it's consistent with the discussion we had yesterday here and today. The shale revolution in the US is creating the right environment for big projects associated with the oil and gas. An example of that is the feedstock which is Henry Hub or gas, natural gas in the US, is relatively very attractive now. So we took a big decisions with Nova Chemicals to expand its footprint into the US. So we made an acquisition of an ethylene cracker back in mid-2017, almost $2.1 billion. We're about to finalize a joint venture with Total, Borealis, and Nova Chemical in Texas, building an ethylene cracker, and Porostar, which is one of Mubadala's company's proprietary technology, polyethylene plant to serve the North America and South America markets. Also with Nova Chemicals, we expanded into Corona expansion and an additional cracker and AST, polyethylene plant. So it's a multi-billion-dollar type of investment just in the last 1 year.
So you're obviously a believer in the shale revolution and the expansion of U.S. production, but you want to be part of the downstream leg of it all. You've talked about Malaysia, you talked about the U.S. investment. There's a third, I think you wanted to highlight that you're involved in now as a global investment opportunity for Mubadala Petroleum.
Yeah, I think the third one, as I mentioned, it's the expansion, organic expansion within Nova Chemical in Canada. Again, it's taken advantage of the low feedstock in North America. So that's also a $2 billion project that will position and maintain current Nova Chemical position in North America. Currently, they are number 4 in terms of ethylene production, and number 5 in North America, and number 5 when it comes to the polyethylene production. So it has the right trajectory, and we're working with them to ensure that they sustain that trajectory and ensure to maintain the market share.
Dr. Sultan, we had an exclusive interview with him prior to the rebranding of ADNOC, and actually was the first TV crew to go into the fields here to shoot, so it was extremely interesting for us at CNN. But he talked about it just gingerly because it's the early stages. Can you see collaboration between Mubadala Petroleum and ADNOC to expand the proven reserves of the UAE? Is there more to be found, and are there gas reserves that could up the game here in terms of reserves and homegrown facilities for natural gas?
I think, as articulated by Dr. Sultan, I think they have their own strategy to expand that. We are already heavily engaged with them in the petrochemical side, and it's up to ADNOC if they see, because we complement each other, by the way. We have the same owner, we're strong internationally, and they have been mandated with the local oil and gas activities. If ADNOC sees, potential that we can complement each other, we'll leave it to ADNOC. But internationally, we're very satisfied with our upstream and downstream position. As I mentioned earlier, we're in the upstream side, we're heavy, or we're more weighted into the gas. So if you look at our portfolio, especially with the new project coming from Malaysia, we're long in gas. So this is complementing the shortages of gas, for example, here as you know, the country is a net importer of gas.
Exactly, and with the Dolphin project very strategically important in that equation. I don't want you to reveal the family jewels, but give us a sense of where do you see investment opportunities that are not part of the portfolio today? Where do you want to focus your attention in the next 3 to 5 years at Mubadala Petroleum in terms of investments or expansion into petrochemicals? What's on the roadmap? As
I mentioned, I think it goes with some of our strategic directions goes with what's been discussed yesterday and today. We see consistent with the industry on the long term, the issue with oil demand. So we're a big believer in the downstream and petchem. And as I mentioned earlier, we have invested a lot lately on the petchem. So we will continue in that space. The petchem, we look at it as an enabler for a new industrial revolution. So the expansion in EVs, for example, autonomous driving, maybe drones, they will need light components. Where do you think that light components will come from? Light components will come from petchem, of course. Today, look at a typical car. It consumes around 150 kilograms of light material, plastics.
I think we need it for the screen, is some of that petrochemical.
Yeah, the
No,
trajectory.
our screen just went out, but it came back up again.
The trajectory is by 2025, a typical car would consume almost 250 kilograms of light material. And that's, a significant growth for the petrochemical industry. When also look at the oil, gas, and petchem growth going forward, oil is achieving or enjoying, hopefully, a modest growth going forward. Gas is more aggressive, around 1.7 CAGR. But petchem, polyolefin, for example, 1% above GDP. So in the range of 4%. So we're a strong believer in that sector, and we will continue playing, hopefully, a big role in that space.
Great. I wanted to finish your thoughts on that, how that equates to demand. We were having the conversation in the OPEC dialogue that we had this morning with Secretary General Barkindo and His Excellency Minister Mazrui and others about peak demand. So if this equation, if we play it out in the petrochemical side, is it really premature before 2040 to say that oil demand and gas demand is going to peak out? From your vantage point as a CEO, focus on petrochemical development.
As a responsible investor, we looked at this very closely.
I'm sure you do, yeah.
So it is impacting definitely our business in the long term. But here is what was missing from yesterday's discussion is to put it in perspective in terms of math. So let's take the fundamentals, the math. So we ran a comprehensive study on the future demand of oil and what parameters will impact that demand. So we ran a very aggressive scenario where government policies will play a major role in reducing the CO2 emission, introducing very strict regulations when it comes to CO2 emission. And we also assumed a very aggressive technology, innovation, and development. So almost a world with no constraints on the supply chain of EVs. We assumed by 2040, new vehicles would be 64% of new sales would be electrical. A global fleet, 2 billion cars globally, 40% of that is almost electrical vehicles. So with that...
By what time frame again?
2040.
2040. Wow.
So with that scenario, very aggressive scenario, the world will still need north of 95 million barrels of oil per day by 2040, driven by economic growth and similar to the discussion they had. So the reality might be not as simple as, tomorrow we're going to wake up and we don't need, or the oil demand is
the
going
other
to
hard fact that people don't pay attention to, and Minister Mazrui said it to me in an interview before, is that we are low-cost producers.
Yeah.
So say you cap at 95 to 100, it's only the fit that survive. Is that the reality here?
Yeah, I think the good news is that even in that scenario, which seems to be a very aggressive scenario, because Barkindo this morning mentioned that they don't see an oil peak in demand up to 2040. So no, in this scenario, we're seeing a peak in 2030. That's what seems to be an aggressive. So post 2030 to 2040, you drop the demand. So it goes by 108 and then to 96. 96, I think it's going to be a challenge also to the industry to fulfill the 96 million barrel of oil by 2040. It will require a massive investment. But the good news for the region is that the lowest cost production will remain coming from this region.
Okay, final question for you, for this audience. Give us an insight of when prices dropped to $26, $28 a barrel. It kind of prompted the mergers, which was very strategic by Abu Dhabi to plan ahead. But if we go down to $40, $50 a barrel again, and nobody wants to see it, but what do you do with your investment portfolio if that's the case? Do you halt? Are you profitable still at $40 to $50 a barrel? What happens to Mubadala Petroleum in the various scenarios which I'm sure you've run already?
Yeah, let me share this story. I mean, when I became the CEO of Mubadala Petroleum, that's when the oil prices start a sharp decline.
Yeah.
And I had a disclaimer to my organization, I had nothing to do with it. So my biggest task was to ensure that the company remains profitable at the low oil prices. And at that time, our definition of low oil prices was like $70, because it's coming from 120 to 70. So the industry, if you remember, we had lower for longer, lower forever, lower for whatever. So we initiated a program within Mubadala saying, lower for better. The reason, because
Lower for better.
we introduce a very aggressive cost optimization, efficiency in the system. So I can say proudly now, we are ready for any oil price scenario as Mubadala Petroleum and Petrochemicals, because we have done extensive work to ensure that our portfolio is resilient regardless of what oil price is going forward.
So this is almost the blessing out of the 2016 crash, is what you're saying. It forced discipline.
It forced discipline, it introduced, because if you recall, when the oil prices were 120, the cost escalation was uncontrollable. And it was not good in the long term for the industry. So I think the recent discipline in the cost, in the efficiency, in the way we run the business is an excellent in the long term for the industry.
Good. Congratulations on the job. I've been watching you since living here in the country for 7 years, and well-deserved. And it's great to see a merger take place during a very strategic window. Nobody panicked that they pulled it off from development to an investment fund. Nice round of applause from Asaba Al-Kabi, the CEO of Mubadala Petroleum and Petrochemicals.
Thank you, John.
Nicely done. Really nice of you.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a short coffee break, and we will reconvene at 2:30 for a panel on a new age for nuclear energy.
It's good.